Welcome to the Dark Stream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and the Wikipedia of the alt-right, otherwise known as Infogalactic and Infogalactic News. Some of you may have not noticed, but Wired did a piece on Infogalactic today. Apparently I am angry about Wikipedia and the 535 thought police, otherwise known as admins, who are policing thought and controlling the discourse and declaring to the world what the facts of this universe are. I'm not angry. I'm just reached the conclusion that there's absolutely no point in fighting on a battleground where the other side controls everything. There's no point in trying to play a football game when the other team owns not only the referees but the stadium and controls the crowd. You know, don't play there. You know, Sun Tzu makes it very clear. You know, choose your ground carefully. And so it's a huge mistake to be involved in Wikipedia in any way, shape, or form. If you're an editor there, you should be editing Infogalactic. You know, what you do is not going to be overturned in an instant because the admins don't approve of it. So anyhow, that's my brief ad for it. You know, I'd encourage those of you who are not familiar with Infogalactic to check it over. The significance of painting over Wikipedia with orange paint, I'm guessing the orange would represent Donald Trump. If there's any meaning to it at all. Actually, I don't think there is any meaning. I think that they just wanted to find an image of paint being new paint being applied to something, because at the moment Infogalactic just looks like another Wikipedia. That's going to change, and we need to get phase 2 done. It's going to take us 6 months before we're in alpha, but once we get the perspective filtering in, and the media is hugely interested in that. I've heard from everything from CBS to BBC to Sky News. They are all interested in what we're doing, but there's nothing to talk about yet because there's nothing really to show yet. And so, it doesn't look any different yet. So, and I was talking to somebody on the blog who was complaining about the fact that we don't have all the images taken across. Well, we're not going to. It's a waste of time. We're not trying to build up the mass audience yet, not until phase 2. What we need now is we want to build up the hardcore. We want to build up the editors. We want to build up the tools. We want to build up the burn unit. All these things are proceeding. The burn unit is people who donate monthly, everything from $10 a month to $50 a month. That helps us pay for the servers and helps us pay for the core programmers, and it's working. It's working, frankly, better than I thought it would. And once we get the perspective filters in place and people see that it really works, then that's when things are going to take off. Until then, it's a tool for us. One thing I want to mention, if you happen to be an indie author, we are going to start launching something called verified pages, which are basically verified autobiographical pages that only you can touch. So, and it'll be linked to the main page about you. So, for example, if there's a page about Larry Correa on Infogalactic, then there's also going to be a verified tab, so that when you click on that, then you can see Larry's version of that page about himself. And what we want to do is we want to give people who are deemed notable the right to speak about themselves. I think it's absolutely brutally stupid that you cannot correct the record on your own Wikipedia page. I had them on the Wikipedia page about me. It had all kinds of information that was totally false. They had the wrong state. They had me being born in Minnesota. I'm not born in Minnesota. I'm born in Boston. They said that I had been divorced once. It's ridiculous. I've never been divorced. And I did not have the right to correct that because you're not supposed to touch your own page and because you're not supposed to be a direct source. Well, this is ridiculous. And so, I think that it's important to have this. Now, I don't think that people should have the right to completely control the page, which is why we're going to have, it's been changed, don't worry, this is a while ago. In fact, it's kind of funny, my page on Wikipedia now is actually quite reasonable. It used to be a complete hit, totally negative thing, but even though the same admins are camping on it, it's considerably more balanced than it used to be, which I think is interesting. Wikipedia is doing fantastic. They bring in, something like they bring in something like $72 million every year. They have a huge endowment and that sort of thing. They have, what we're doing is kind of ridiculous if you look at the imbalance of the resources. Wikipedia is not broke. Wikipedia, they say they're broke. They're always begging, but they have massive quantities of money in the Wikimedia Foundation. They have to publish. It's public record. You can see it all, and you look at that and you wonder what on earth. They're not even spending most of it on anything related to Wikipedia. So that's why it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out once people realize that Infogalactic is actually a superior, more useful product, which is going to happen in about a year. And so hopefully a lot of people will stop supporting Wikimedia Foundation and start supporting Infogalactic. We'll see. But that's not what I was here to talk about tonight. What I wanted to talk about tonight is the Democratic failure in Georgia. It's the same thing that happened in the 3 previous special elections. It's essentially the same thing that happened in the presidential election itself. And so what you're seeing here is the Democratic Party failing to understand that it is now the anti-white party. This is something I wrote about a long time ago. We now have identity politics in the United States. That is now how politics works. And I don't even know what guy are you talking about. The person who won in Georgia was a woman. So, and I know nothing about her. But the point is that what we are seeing is the Democratic Party has gambled on the California strategy. What's the California strategy? It is basically importing a lot of non-whites, mostly Hispanics. Hispanics are very, very left-wing. All 3 of their parties are essentially left-wing. 2 of them are actually members of the Socialist International. So they are very, very left-wing oriented. So, but what the Democrats forgot is that They thought, like the British Labour Party did, that if you bring in left-wing immigrants, then they are going to, then they will add to your vote, and then you will win. And that has worked in California. Republicans are not going to win in California, but only because there are the whites in California are basically mostly left-wing. There's been a tremendous outflow of white Californians, the sort of Republicans who the Orange County Republicans. Those type of Californians have been fleeing California for 10 years or more. So that's why the strategy worked in California. It doesn't work in other places because whites are abandoning the Democratic Party. If you look at the kind of men who are now voting for Donald Trump, who are now voting Republican in places like Michigan, in places like Minnesota, in places like Pennsylvania, these are all places that used to go regularly, and populaces that used to go regularly for Republicans. And so, and you're also seeing white men moving over. It's not just the union workers and stuff. Remember my debate with Jack Murphy? He'd written something called "From Democrat to Deplorable." He voted for Obama originally. Now he was supporting Trump. So what's happening is that more whites, particularly white men, are voting on the basis of identity. They're not necessarily voting for Republicans. They're not necessarily voting for anything. They're voting against the party that is opposed to them, that sees them as the enemy. They're voting against the non-white party. And that's why one reason why the alt-right is inevitable. Because the alt-right is the only right-wing side, the only group in the right wing who understands identity. What's the point of voting for that if they don't realize it? Because when enough people vote for a party, they control the party. Okay? I mean, you're simply not going, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to vote for a Democrat if you are a white man. It doesn't make any sense if you're a white woman either, but women tend to be a little bit more susceptible, to the rhetoric and voting against their own interests. That's why establishing the female vote was the first plank in the Fascist Manifesto. They wanted to make sure women were voting because they believed that they could easily manipulate them. So, anyhow, it's actually Republicans should be known. Both Republicans and Democrats should be known for letting Israel influence our democracy. The idea that Russia is influencing America's democracy is absolutely ridiculous. If you look at the amount of influence that Israel has, in fact, the American-Israeli Political Action Committee is not even registered as a foreign agent as it should be. So, if you want to get into foreign influence in American politics, that's kind of a third rail. If anyone brings up Russian influence, just say, how much influence is Russian versus how much is Israeli? I'm not an anti-Semite. In fact, Israel's greatest military historian was right here in this library last weekend. I dare say that I know a lot more Israelis, and I'm friends with a lot more Israelis than you are. But the reality is what it is. You know, there's absolutely, if you want to talk about foreign influence, if foreign influence is a bad thing, you got to talk Israel, not Russia. Anyhow, that's beside the point. If the troll keeps trying to pop up, we'll just nuke him. So, anyhow, actually speaking of anti-Semitism, it's going to be funny. In a couple weeks, we're going to be publishing a book by Martin Van Creveld, and it's going to be, okay, we're going to get rid of this loser. Gotta love the SJWs. We're going to be publishing a book that people are going to completely freak out about and go crazy about until they realize that the author is Jewish. So it should be pretty funny. You know, Greece is in a very difficult position. You know, Greece was occupied by Turkey. They finally got free, and now they're basically occupied by the European Union. So they're in a very bad, very weak position. We'll have to see what happens. But to get back to the U.S., the reason that the Democrats are failing is that they don't realize that by bringing in all of the minorities and by making their party primarily appeal to non-whites, they have driven out a percentage of their former white base. And that's why, you know, I was astounded, absolutely astounded, that Donald Trump came anywhere close to Hillary Clinton in Minnesota. I mean, unless you're from Minnesota, unless you're from the People's Republic, unless you realize that they don't even have a Democratic Party, they have a Democrat Farmer Labor Party there. Unless you realize how far left Minnesota historically has been, thanks to all the Scandinavians, the fact that Donald Trump very nearly won in Minnesota shows you how much white support the Democrats have lost. Should we say something? Obviously we should say something. We should say, you have to go back. That's what should have been said since 1965. And so, you know, so it's just, you know, it's Canadians have their own problems. You know, they're getting invaded all over the place, especially, you know, by the Chinese out in the West. You know, what a lot of people don't understand, what you guys don't seem to understand, is that the alternative, you know, this idea, it's hard to sell going back to the past. Of course it is. Guess what? The alternative is ethnic war. That's coming next. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to destroy the United States. You know, we are currently in a situation that is very similar to Yugoslavia writ large, only the situation here is arguably much worse because the numbers are bigger. Here's what you have to understand. Mass migration is virtually identical to war. There's no way to distinguish between the two. And the United States has endured the biggest biggest mass migration in human history. When you include the second and third generation of those immigrant populations, over 82 million foreigners are resident in the USA. And so, when is it going to happen? I don't know. My calculation is somewhere around the year 2033 is when the United States collapses. You know, and it's going to. And so the important thing to understand is that ethnic cleansing is absolutely normal. Okay? People talk about Switzerland. Okay? In Switzerland, they had a series of religious wars back in the 16th century. And the way that they solved it was they set up the cantons separately, so that you had Catholic cantons and Protestant cantons, and if you were a Protestant in the Catholic canton, you had to move. You know, there's two little cantons up in the north of Switzerland called Appenzell. There's Appenzell Innerrhoden and Appenzell Ausserrhoden, and the reason that there are two cantons in this, fairly little area is because one is the Catholic canton and the other is the Protestant canton. And so that's in the 15th century. In the 20th century, millions of Germans were ethnically cleansed from Eastern Europe. Gdansk in Poland used to be Danzig. Also, if you look at what happened in Pakistan and India, if you look at what's happening right now in Myanmar or Burma, where the Muslims, the Rohingya, I think they're called, have been ethnically cleansed from almost all of Myanmar, and they're just in one little strip of land, and they'll probably be forced out of that relatively soon. I don't know or care what Canadians should do. I'm not a Canadian. Canada's not my problem. So the point is that you look at these much smaller ethnic cleansings and religious cleansings of these much smaller ethnic and religious cleansing of people who were much more similar to each other than the Somalis are to the Minnesotans, than the Southern blacks are to the and there's no possible way for the status quo to continue. And that doesn't even get into the inevitable Muslim conflict with everyone, because that exists in every culture where Muslims make up 5% or more of the population. And so these are hard facts to accept. I understand that. I don't expect most people to agree with me. Not yet. Not until they see it starting to happen. Not until they see it starting to take place. Things like Black Lives Matter, and things like ISIS and so forth, those things are only going to get worse. And it's already happening. I've pointed out before. Look at the ethnic demographics of Compton, California. Most of us still think that Compton is like, the black capital of the black capital of cultural Black America. It's now actually 75% Hispanic. The Hispanics have driven the blacks out. And so that's the way that it works. And there's nothing that you or I or anyone else can do to stop it. No, the U.S. cannot prevent this from happening. This was baked in the cake in 1965. And it's actually a testimony to how big the United States is and how willing the federal government has been to pay for foreign residents, that they've been able to keep a lid on it this long. But it's not going to be possible much longer. And so, it's just these historical trends exist, and they're not interested in your opinion. They're not, they don't have the ability to be interested in it. Why 2033? That is the average lifespan of a currency is 70 years. 2033 is 70 years after the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1973. So I figured that around that time there would be a financial crisis that would prevent the federal government from being able to fork out enough money to keep a lid on things. Now, it may get worse sooner. I mean, there's a lot of things that you just can't count on. I had no idea this whole migrant crisis in Europe starting in 2015, that shocked me. Why would someone like Merkel ever, why would a chancellor of Germany ever invite hundreds of thousands of Syrians to go and live in Germany? That's insane. It's crazy, but it happened. And so you have to keep in mind that what has happened in the past is probably what is going to happen in the future. Right now, people have too much to lose. Right now, people are sufficiently happy with their porn, with their video games, and with their shopping. I don't know if that would, if the dollar losing reserve status would be enough to trigger it. But what we're about to see in Illinois may give us a preview of what's likely to happen, because Illinois' comptroller just informed the governor and the legislature that they can no longer, the state can no longer afford to pay its bills. And so if they cannot continue to pay off all the retirees on pensions and pay off all the EBT cards and so forth, that things could get very, very interesting in Illinois very, very quickly. And so I think Illinois is a situation to watch out for. So anyhow, that's all I have for tonight. So thanks for stopping in. If you haven't been using Infogalactic, I would encourage you to do so. And I will look forward to seeing you soon. Have a good evening.